Hey guys, welcome back to episode 42, Nutrition for the Mind, Body, and Soul. And today I have Joe Devaney, who is a friend of mine for the last 5 years. And just to let you know a little bit about him, Joe is happily married to his wife, Laura, who's going to celebrate a year in just a couple of months. Yes, and I was in their wedding. He is a level 2 CrossFit trainer at Certis CrossFit. He has his bachelor's degree in kinesiology and owns his own nutrition company, which I'm a part of, called Deep Roots Nutrition. And on his spare time, he competes in CrossFit competitions around the United States because that sounds really cool. And so, Joe, welcome to Her Faith Inspires podcast.
Thank you.
So I want you to tell the audience a little something about you that I didn't mention in your bio.
Okay. I am a diehard Raider fan. Everybody that knows me will know that, just not my bio. But other things that are a little more pertain more to kind of my job and what I do is that I'm more focused on mindset. So mindset's a big deal with how I coach and how I approach nutrition and exercise. And I know we're going to most likely talk about that later. So
yeah, so we're going to talk a lot about nutrition today. And so again, I just started Joe's nutrition program probably 4 months ago, almost, something like that. And just to give a little bit of background about that, I was a macro counter. So talking about mental, tough. It was mentally tough to get out of that habit of constantly counting macros. And that's one of the things that Joe works with you with is how to think about food. So Joe, speaking of that, you help a lot of people change the way their bodies look. But in order to do that, we have to work on, like you said, their mindset. And you do that through nutrition and exercise. But how do you help change the mindset of somebody when they're working through the process of trying to get healthy?
Yeah, so you have to kind of envision everyone. Everyone has a different kind of emotional level when it comes to this. Our emotions are tied to our health, our nutrition, how we exercise. So some people can kind of easily get in the groove of eating better and exercising. Some people have a really hard time with it. And usually that is for emotional reasons. So one way we can work on the emotions is through mindset and being cognizant of how we approach things mentally. So that's really the approach is each person individually and getting their mind in that kind of that thought process of getting better, kind of going from where they're at and then how to make it better. Just because we're all at different levels,
Yeah, and I like for me, I felt like when I first started the nutrition program, yours, I thought we kind of started off basic with, I think the first thing was pick a 5-minute habit or something like that. And
action plan.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm this has nothing to do with food.
Right.
But it was a build up to making you think differently about just your habits in general. So we're going to eventually talk about that more too, because I want you to really tell people about your nutrition program and how that helps. And it really is a commitment of a year mostly.
Right, yeah.
Which it already does. Like I said, I've only been 4 months into it, so it's helped me out a lot with the way that I think about macro counting, even though I consider myself pretty healthy going into it. But the mindset wasn't there.
Right.
So I'm happy with that. But we're currently in the situation of COVID, which means that, we're constantly being updated with data, whether it be death rates or infection rates or whatever, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of the people who are seeing the worst results in this are the ones who are not healthy. So we don't hear, much from doctors and other medical people placing emphasis on health and overall wellness. And that's what bothers me the most about COVID, I think. And all the data is that nobody wants to tell you how to get healthy. They just want to tell you to wear a mask and stay indoors, right? So why do you think that is?
I think there's 2 reasons. First one, probably a little more political, is there's money and power involved in the situation. So people are going to try and take advantage of it in those ways. So I think that's kind of where we get some of it. The second part is there's really never been an approach to health and a preventative measure. And so people are all focused on sort of the instant gratification. So that's why we have people with really poor diets because they want to eat whatever they want that gives them a quick high, drink whatever they want because it gives them a quick high, as well as people who want to exercise because it's uncomfortable. It's not fun for most people.
Right.
And so those challenging and uncomfortable situations bring about a delayed gratification where we have better quality of life, we're happier, we're healthier. When we get sick with COVID, we recover quicker, things like that. So part of it is just kind of human nature, is to where people don't want to do those things. People don't want to put themselves in those situations where they actually have to work a little bit and get a little uncomfortable. But again, it also ties into money too, is that our whole healthcare system is based off of not preventing you from getting sick, because you can't really make money off of that. It's about when you are sick, take our drugs, take our medicine, do this, do that, and people profit off of that. So
yeah, for sure, which makes a ton of sense. So I think it goes hand in hand. I think that we're promoting, somebody made a good point the other day on social media. It was like, we have these COVID cases, and then you have, if it's really about health, people are walking outside, taking off their mask and smoking a cigarette. Yet cigarettes are still permitted. And then you have people telling you to wear your mask and stay indoors, but nobody's telling the Food and Drug Administration to stop putting preservatives into food.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's really about our health, we have to be proactive about it and not rely on other people to tell us how to stay healthy, I think, right. In the long run. So speaking of like habits and mentality of how we approach food and stuff like that, how are habits created? And that can be healthy and unhealthy habits. And I think sometimes I always look at that as disciplining. Like if it's a healthy habit, it's more of a discipline. Right. And I would say if it's an unhealthy habit, we've just gotten into a routine of eating unhealthy. And I think a lot of times people know what they should do, but they don't know how to do it. And a lot of time that's where you come in with this. And we need to tell people or give them the step-by-step process. So anyways, how do we create food habits over time, whether they're good or bad?
Yeah. So I think we create these habits. They start from when we're born, and it's just based off of life experiences and how we react to them. So when we're younger, we don't really have the tool set to understand our emotions, or kind of understand why we think the way we do. And I think that's where we start to create habits. You think there's like culturally, right? There's some cultures out there that are all based around food, and eating a lot of food, and maybe foods that aren't the healthiest for you. So if you grew up in that environment, that's something that's going to stick with you for a while. Now, ways we change that is, the biggest thing is to become self-aware. So a lot of times we do things we don't even know we're doing them. For a lot of people, like you said, you could tell or most people know what not to eat, what to eat to be healthy. They know they need to work out, but they still don't do it. Right. So there's more to it than just that. And that's where the emotional side comes in, and that's usually tied into our habits. So once you get people to become more self-aware, right? So, for example, if someone has a problem with eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's every night, like they, come to me, they want to, get healthier, maybe lose some fat, whatever it is. We sit down, we start going through things, and they start to kind of realize like, oh, dang, I eat ice cream every single night, and I eat a lot of it, Now that they're aware of it, they can start to slowly chip away at making that a new habit, right? Of maybe we could switch something out for the ice cream, or now we can figure out, well, why am I eating ice cream? Maybe I'm stressed out, and this is how I cope with it. Well, can we learn other ways to cope that don't involve an unhealthy way of fixing that problem? And so a lot of those things just don't come about unless you're focused on it. You're trying to be aware of it and be more mindful of what you're doing. So a lot of what the coaching is in our program is around mindfulness. It's like you talked about with macros. Macros is so easy because you don't have to be mindful. You just scan your food, plug it in, and by the end of the day, you're like, cool, I hit these numbers and I'm done. And that's why it's challenging to then kind of work on that mindfulness to where those numbers aren't there for you to hit. And now you have to really focus on your own mentality. Like, okay, why am I eating this food, right? Am I eating this because I'm hungry or my body needs it? Or am I just eating this because I had a really bad day at work and I'm trying to, drown my sorrows with it, which happens. And it happens with a lot of people. Because food and eating is an emotional experience. There's no way around it. So once you become more aware of it, you can have more control over your emotions and your actions surrounding it. You take a little more control over your life, if you will, or your nutrition and your exercise.
So that's why I think that we probably don't realize is that food is, I say it a lot because I talk a lot about the spiritual side of things, but we're a mind, body, and soul person, right? Wholly, I consist of more than just my body. And so, like you were saying, you can't get around food being an emotional experience. And for me, I think I always thought I wasn't an emotional eater, but I think macros made me were tied to me in an emotional way. I always thought my success depended upon my numbers, hitting my numbers of my macros. And then I was a failure if I didn't reach my macro levels that day. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose all this muscle that I worked so hard to get or whatever. Or I'm going to get fat if I went over on my fats. So in reality, it was more of a mental and emotional thing. But what are signs that people are kind of tied to their food emotionally? Because I think sometimes too, like I heard somebody tell me when I was younger and I wasn't sure at the time, and I didn't really see the correlation with the mind, body, soul and all that kind of stuff at the time. But they would say, if you go to your refrigerator, open the door and you're staring at it, wondering what you should eat, but you're not really hungry, you're probably needing something other than food. You just don't know what to fill that with. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. So that comes from a couple things. Like one, we kind of call that boredom eating. So you're at home or whatever, you have downtime and you go and eat something. So what that does is naturally our brain gives us a reward when we eat food. It hits our pleasure senses because we need food. So there's kind of a biological system in our body that when we eat, our brain releases dopamine, which makes us feel happy and we feel good. And that's our brain's way of kind of telling us like, hey, we need more of that, right? And so back before food was so abundant as it is now, it was a lot harder to get. So it was a lot harder to overeat. Well, now you can get any food you want at any time during the day, just about, any time during the day. And so you can constantly get that dopamine hit, that high. It's literally, it's a high that your brain releases into the body. It's your feel good, their feel good receptors. And that is why, you get that boredom eating is because you're bored. Maybe something, you're sitting with something that happened and you start to think about it now that things have slowed down. And then you go maybe mindlessly and you go eat some food because that's going to then give you that high where you don't feel like you're, at a lull. Yeah. And that's the reason why kind of boredom eating is there. But also eating in general, why it's emotional is because you have that response when you eat food. And that's why it kind of ties back to what we were talking about before is the mindfulness is once you can start to understand that and understand your own tendencies and habits, then you can start to have a little more control over that. But that does take a level of discomfort, right? Like if you're used to maybe it's like having a drink every night or, having some sort of sweet every night. And like, that's a way for you to kind of get that quick high or that hit of dopamine. Some days you just have to sit with that. You know what I mean? Yeah. As you're working through it, doesn't mean you have to completely cut those things out, go cold turkey and be like, I can't do this, but sit with it and then really sit with those thoughts that come with it. Like, what am I trying to hide from? What am I trying to cover up? Like, what emotions am I trying to mask? And usually there's a much healthier and sustainable way to cope with those things. But that takes time. It takes discipline, levels of discomfort. So it's all a process and everyone's different, right? Yeah. Everyone has a different way of kind of working through those things.
Yeah. So even on so those of you that are listening, when you think of the nutrition program, the good thing about you is that you're like always there looking through the comments and some of the questions that are asked are hard. Right. Like, I'm just like, okay, this is food, but it goes much deeper than that. And sometimes I think I've even answered before, like, hey, Joe, this is way too hard. I don't know. I gotta think about it. Like, I don't know what I'm thinking when I'm, choosing my food. I gotta think about what I'm thinking, because I think sometimes we methodically go through the motions of what we're putting in our bodies. Right. And like you said, a lot of times we don't think about the long-term effects of that. So, and again, I think the underlying point to all of this is that it's more than just a physical thing that we're doing every day, right?
All tied in.
So, since the show, the podcast is called Her Faith Inspires, we do have to tie it back to biblical things. And I know that you're a Christian too, so that's easy for you. How should we look at our health from a biblical perspective?
Yeah, I think it's stated numerous times in the Bible and in God's word that, we're to honor God with our bodies. And kind of like you said, we're all interconnected, everything. So like our body is a part of who we are. And so like, that's a huge thing is that, like our body houses the Holy Spirit and we are, bought at a price. I think I was like 1 Corinthians, we were paid with a price, so we need to honor our body.
Right.
And so it's all tied together. And I think like with that command, like God's obviously onto something there and he created us. So like, there's so much science that goes into the idea that your physical health is directly correlated with your mental and emotional well-being as well.
Yeah.
And those things are connected. And I think that's like on purpose. That's by God's design, obviously. Right. And that's the reason why he tells us to honor our body, is because the more we honor our body, the healthier we are in other areas of life and our health, spiritual health and so forth. Because just think about it this way, like, you don't get a full night's sleep, like you're cranky the next day and you're angry and you're not a good person to be around, like you're not honoring your body that way. And like, look at where that affects, that trickles into other areas of your life. So it's like very important for us to take care of our bodies, as well as like studying. This kind of maybe a side note that I only think about, but when I study nutrition and like the intricacies and how really like complex it is, it's like such a cool testament to who God is, that like, especially with nutrition, there's vitamins and minerals that we haven't even discovered yet. Like you buy a multivitamin, you're like, here's all the vitamins I need. It's like, that's not even like, it's barely scratching the surface of vitamins and minerals that are actually out there that we just don't even know about.
Right.
That
are in like your natural foods and stuff.
Exactly. And so we get all that through like the food that God's already created for us, right? Through plants and animals, and stuff that's real, you know? And I think that's honor too, a way to honor God as well in ourselves, is that like, when we eat foods that are like whole foods, or they're close to that source that's actually from nature, like that's what God intended us to do. Like that's a part of like that cycle that we have. And that's something that I think about when I'm eating, foods that are prepared, that are not processed. Like, this is what God intended me to eat, and it's nourishing to our bodies. It's not just like I'm eating this because it makes me feel good, like mentally, or it gives me again that dopamine high. But it's like, I'm eating this because I know, like, I'm honoring my body with this. Like, I'm honoring my body, and this is what God's intention was.
Yeah.
So that's really fun, and that's a fun way to approach from a biblical perspective, like your health and exercise. Is that like, it's very, very nurturing. It's such a nurturing process. And I think too, like one of the things that we talked about before, that people don't do this, they don't want to eat better, they don't want to exercise, is because they don't want to be uncomfortable. And there's literally no reality to where we live a life without discomfort.
Yeah. And
I think like, if we read through scripture all the time, like discomfort is a part of our existence, and it always will be, no matter what. And it's in every area of our lives. But the part of that is like, it breeds that discipline, and that ability to overcome those things develops that strength.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And again, that's like you said, it's every aspect of your life. Like we're talking about spiritual and physical. It's the same thing, and, for me, like I've been around working out for so long that I understand the process that I have to put myself through adversity to get better. Right. And that adversity is a workout. That's not like, I'm not doing this like, man, this feels great. Usually sucks. I'm in pain and it hurts, but I'm also understanding in my head, like, I'm like rewiring my brain to think like, this pain is actually going to produce goodness later on. And that's the same thing spiritually, right? Like we go through our trials and different suffering and different levels of discomfort, but like, as long as we're focused on God, we're going to come on the other side stronger. Right. Sure. And it's the same thing too, is like when you're eating healthier or you're working out, don't focus on the pain that you're in, or like, oh, this sucks, I hate this and all that. 'Cause you don't really become stronger through that. Like you have to like embrace that discomfort and know like, this is going to produce good later on. Maybe not in this exact moment.
Right.
I'm going to hurt right now, but later on, this is going to be good.
Yeah. So there's like so many good things in there. I think for us as Americans, we've made things so convenient. And another thing Americans are in the, like, as far as Christianity and things like that are concerned, we have never had to suffer for a lot of things, like other Christians in other countries, and even other Christians in other countries when it comes to food and nutrition as well. I mean, we have fast food on every corner, and if it's not fast enough, we get upset. You know? So convenience has really taken away our opportunities for suffering. And I think, I hate the word suffering. I
do too.
I'm like, God, I don't want to suffer, you know, but at the same time, it's like, what does the Bible say? Like, suffering produces patience, patience produces perseverance, perseverance produces endurance. All those things produce something good in us. And all those words we use at the gym. Right. We use like, hey, if you keep enduring this, or if you keep persevering through it, you're going to end up seeing results on the other side. And unfortunately, it's ingrained in our culture to stay away from anything that makes us uncomfortable.
Right.
And we don't see the rewards of it. And I mean, again, I'm preaching to the choir here because I don't want to suffer either. And my boys just started at CrossFit. Well, Wyatt did, not Wesley.
Yeah.
And Wyatt's suffering every
He
time
does
he
suffer.
comes in there.
He's there though.
He's there. But he walks away, and every time we get in the car, that sucked. You know? But I always tell him, don't think about how bad it hurts. Like, you're going to end up getting in good shape, and try to tell him all the benefits of it. But that's why if you're needing help with nutrition, like, you totally got to get connected with Joe, because he will literally walk you through it and help you with the whole thing, not just like, hey, eat some vegetables and some fruit and be done with it. It's going to change your mindset and it'll help you grow a lot. So, like, coming on the final question here, what is the responsibility of someone who is to steward their bodies well? Because let's face it is my responsibility to take care of my body, because, like you said, God gave it to us, and nobody else is going to do that for me. So What would be our responsibility?
Yeah, kind of like we were talking about before, like that, again, it's our responsibility. Like, we're called to do that in God's word, which means that what that actually like would look like in everyday life is taking care of yourself. Like again, doing those nourishing things to where you're eating as close to whole foods as possible, right? And reasonable amounts. So like, if I were just to sum up in one sentence, how to eat healthy, how to eat right, if you will, is to eat as close to whole foods as possible in a reasonable amount, meaning like, the more processed the food is, the easier it is to overeat it. Right. So eat foods that are close to not being processed. Don't overeat it. And there you go. There's your recipe for the nutrition side.
Right.
Also in the program, since it is a year long, it goes over a lot of things outside of nutrition as well, because again, they're all tied. But we go into factors such as like your sleep, stress levels, and again, mindset, like how to work through or how to persevere through struggles, right? Just because you're going through struggles doesn't mean like you're going to be stronger. Like we talked about, it's got to be struggles that you can overcome, right? So how to approach life in that manner. And, God says it in his word too, is like, he's never gonna give us something that we can't overcome. So there's always an answer to the struggle that you're in that moment.
Right.
So, I mean, that's kind of the idea that I would say. Obviously easier said than done. Yeah. And that's why it's good to have a coach, and just in every area of life, having a mentor, someone you can look for answers to and all that. But somebody that knows what they're talking about, just because it's I don't want to say easier, but you have a better chance of learning when there's other people there to help you through it.
Yeah. Okay. So I know I didn't tell you about this question, but there are a lot of like diet and exercise programs out there. And if you stick to them, they work, but there's a difference between yours and ones that will work if you stick to them. What would you say is like the biggest difference?
Yeah, it's that we're focused on, again, your mindset. So like you said, like in the fitness industry, which they control the narrative of nutrition, it's always been about this new hot thing that is going to give you everything you've ever wanted in a very short amount of time. For example, we'll just go with keto.
Yeah.
So nothing's really wrong with keto. Like if you were to do the keto diet, which is, for those that don't know, is eating very high fats, moderate protein, little to no carbs. And what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to train your body to only use fat as a fuel source as opposed to carbohydrates and fat.
But that's if you get into ketosis.
Right. So ideally, I mean, if you could stick to that, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But here's the thing. You're not going to lose weight. You're not going to lean out unless you're eating less food than you're burning. So you could do that on any sort of diet. You could do that if you're eating carbohydrates or not. Like you can do it on any sort of diet as long as you eat less than what you burn.
Yeah.
But in the fitness industry, people, again, money, they want your money. So they're going to tell you, hey, keto's the only way to do this. Carbs are evil. And if you eat carbs, your whole body's going to shrivel up and you're going to die. But I have the answer. So if you buy my book, you read my book, you're going to know the answer. It's not true. It's all garbage. So that's the idea, is like, we're really just trying to give people the truth through our program, being like, all right, take everything you've learned about nutrition, throw out the window. Some of it might be right, but a lot of it, again, is kind of skewed towards thinking a certain way. The more restrictive you are and the more like sort of like boundaries you put on what you can do, you're not going to stick to it. Yeah. So if we really teach people how to kind of get in line with their hunger cues, and they tell them, how can you get more of the good stuff in your diet rather than be like, hey, don't do this, don't do that, you have a better chance of succeeding and making it sustainable for a lifetime. Yeah. Because we all know what to do. I'm sure we've all done diet before, and it maybe worked for a little bit, but like how long does it actually go on for? Because usually it's the diets are always revolved around like basically restricting yourself in a certain way, and it just doesn't work.
No.
But again, that's the narrative because there's people that make money off of it.
Yeah.
So
the restrictive diets, if you tell me I can't have something, I'm out because I'm gonna want the very thing you just told me I can't have.
Right.
So I don't like that.
Yeah, and the science doesn't support it either.
Yeah.
So the thing with nutrition science is it's still in its infancy. So there's still a lot that needs to be done with nutrition science. But again, the science doesn't support the majority of like the eating styles that are out there that like this is the it, right? Like sugar is like demonized. People are like sugar is the worst in the world. You eat sugar, all these bad things are gonna happen to you. Not true.
Yeah.
If you overeat sugar, yes. Just like if you overeat fat or you overeat food in general,
or salt.
yeah, you're gonna have those health issues.
Yeah.
But sugar itself's not gonna do it, right? There was real quick. There was a guy that was kind of debating another guy. This doctor was saying sugar is the reason why people are fat, and carbohydrates basically. So sugar is the basic form of carbohydrates. You could say you don't eat sugar. If you eat any form of carbohydrate, your body breaks it down into sugar.
Yeah, I've heard
so
that.
it is going to be turned into sugar in your body no matter what. That's the basic building blocks of carbohydrates. But this guy was saying carbohydrates in general is the reason why people are fat. Well, in the prisoner of war camps and in the camps where they had all the Jews and everyone in World War II, they only fed them bread and tea and coffee. And so that's all they're eating is carbohydrates. But if you look at them, clearly they're not overweight.
No.
So that's just a small example. But again, the science doesn't support that narrative. But again, these doctors or people that say those things, dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
They're all trying to sell you something.
Right.
So
that makes sense. Yeah, and keto's like super hot right now.
yeah,
And then,
it's been around forever. That's the funny part. For a long
really?
time. I did it like 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And try it out, and it just got hot within the past couple of years. I'm like, people have been doing that for a while.
Yeah, and intermittent fasting. People are like doing that right now.
Yeah. So another example about that, I had a guy tell me one time, he's like, I'm intermittent fasting. I lost like 10 pounds. This thing totally works because it does all these things with your hormones and makes you lose weight. I'm like, oh, okay. So I started digging a little deeper, and he goes, yeah, dude. He's like, I used to eat 4 bowls of cereal every morning, and now that I cut that out, I'm like, backtrack, dude. You ate 4 bowls of cereal a morning. You're probably overeating thousands of calories a day. Like, that's why you gained that weight.
Yeah.
You cut that out, like, you've already cut down a significant amount of how much food you're eating.
Right.
It's not the fact that your hormones have changed. It's the fact that you're eating way less food.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. See, Joe, that's why you have a nutrition company.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Which we didn't tell people, and I should have said it at the beginning. Like, you were my personal trainer for like 2.5 years, something like that, because I wanted to, like, I've done CrossFit. At that time, I only did it for like 6 or 7 months, and I broke my elbow and all that. And I was like, I'm going to get fat, Joe. So you helped me like get in shape. But then my nutrition changed to macros and all that. But now I'm doing your nutrition program, which is, like I said, really good, getting off macros. So the good thing is, like, we live in the same town, so it's easy, but you could also be everybody else's coach remotely by your nutrition program, which, like I said, is super cool. It's every day you're connected in some way, and you're constantly getting lessons and feedback. And I love it too, because the program gives recipes for like protein shakes and just lots of different ways to go shopping lists. I mean, it's endless because you're very highly equipped, and then you have somebody there that you can get feedback from.
Right. It's very, very in depth.
It is in depth. It's in depth, and sometimes I get like 5 or 6 lessons behind on my reading because I know I'm like a bad student sometimes. And then I have to go back in and like read through it and take my time with it. But it's been good for me. So with that being said, how can people find you and contact you if they want to get connected with this program and learn more? Yeah.
So on my Instagram, it's Deep Roots Nutrition. That's at Deep Roots Nutrition. That's where I do all my nutrition stuff is through that. I'm still working on getting a website and more content out there, but for right now, that's the best way to do it. And on there, I make posts about once or twice a week, and usually it's an informative or educational post, just trying to give people little bits and pieces to kind of bite off at a time and make them really start to think about how they approach nutrition, how they think about it. And then if you want to get more in depth, you could just message me through that Instagram page, and we can get started from there, and chat on the phone and all that good stuff to kind of answer some questions.
Yeah, and it's super affordable too, because I was kind of surprised at the price. And
Yeah, no, I've made it very affordable. Just because this is the first year I've started it.